I was sitting in my study this morning, looking at an old black and white photograph of my father. It was taken sometime in the mid-50s, back in Ohio. He's standing in the backyard, wearing his work clothes, holding a plate with a massive ham sandwich in one hand and a cold beer in the other. He looked strong, indestructible even. But as I sat here with my tea, at 77 years old, I couldn't help but think about how much we didn't know back then. My father was a man of habit. He believed that if you worked hard and didn't complain, your body would just fall in line. He ignored the small signals, the quiet whispers his body was sending him, until those whispers became a roar that he couldn't quiet down anymore. I've spent a lot of time lately looking through my old notebooks. Since Eleanor had that health scare a few years back, I've become something of a student of the things we usually ignore. You see, when you cross 60, the margin for error starts to shrink. We all feel it. We start hearing about friends getting diagnoses that shake us to our core. And the first thing we do, the thing I did, is look for someone to blame. We want a villain. We want to point at the sugar bowl or the bread basket and say, "That's it. That's the monster under the bed." But what I've learned through months of reading and talking to people who actually know the science is that we often spend all our energy fighting the wrong battles. We're terrified of things that might not be the real threat, while we keep the true culprits right in our refrigerators, neatly wrapped in plastic. There's so much noise out there. One day you hear that sugar is the only thing feeding cancer. The next day someone tells you that soy is going to ruin your hormones. Then it's red meat or gluten or dairy. It's enough to make you want to just close your eyes and eat whatever is in front of you because it feels like everything is a landmine. I remember when Eleanor was at her weakest. I was so desperate to help her that I started cutting out everything. I threw away the sugar, the bread, the fruit. I was even afraid to give her a piece of salmon because I'd read something somewhere about toxins. I was acting out of pure, unadulterated fear. And fear is a terrible nutritionist. It makes you restrictive, it makes you miserable, and most importantly, it makes you miss the actual data. When I finally calmed down and started looking at the evidence, real, long-term evidence, I realized that only two things have been consistently, clearly linked to an increased risk of our bodies losing the fight against cancer. Just two. And when I saw what they were, it hit me like a ton of bricks. Because one of them was the very thing I grew up thinking was the safe choice for a quick lunch. It was the food I'd packed in my kids' lunch boxes for years. It was the food my father ate every single day of his working life. I'm talking about processed meats. Now, I want you to hear me clearly on this. I'm 77. I'm not here to sell you a supplement or a miracle cure. I'm just a man who wants to be around to see his grandkids graduate, and I suspect you want something similar. I'm telling you this because I wish someone had sat me down 20 years ago and explained the difference between a steak and a hot dog. Because in my mind, meat was meat. But the science I've been digging into tells a very different story. Before we get into why that deli ham is so different from a piece of roast beef, I want to clear the air about some of the things that kept me awake at night for no reason. Let's talk about sugar for a second. I spent a year being terrified of an apple because I heard that sugar feeds cancer. It sounds logical, doesn't it? We know cancer cells use glucose for energy. But here's the thing I had to learn. Every single cell in your body uses glucose for energy. Your brain needs it. Your heart needs it. If you try to starve the cancer by cutting out every bit of sugar, the cancer is clever enough to find another way to grow. But your healthy cells, the ones you need to stay strong, they start to wither. I realized that the fear of a piece of fruit or a bit of honey was misplaced. It's about the balance, the overall diet. It's not the sugar itself that's the primary driver of the risk we're talking about today. And then there's soy. My daughter Rebecca, she's a nutritionist, and she had to sit me down and explain this one 3 times before I believed her. I thought soy was dangerous, especially for women because of the estrogen in it. But Rebecca showed me that phytoestrogens in soy are different. They aren't the same as the estrogen our bodies produce. In fact, the most recent papers I've read suggest they might actually be protective. We spend so much time worrying about a tofu stir-fry while ignoring the real problem sitting in the deli drawer. And red meat? I used to think I had to become a vegetarian to be healthy. But the data doesn't actually say that unprocessed red meat, eaten in moderation, is the big bad wolf. The problem isn't the cow. The problem is what we do to the meat to make it last forever on a shelf. That brings me back to the one food I've effectively removed from my life: processed meats. I'm talking about the stuff that's been cured, smoked, salted, or chemically altered to stay fresh for weeks. The deli turkey, the sausages, the bacon, the pepperoni on your pizza, the hot dogs at the ballpark. I found a study recently that stayed with me for days. It was a massive piece of research, tracking thousands of people over years, and the conclusion was stark. Eating just 50 grams of processed meat a day increases your risk of colorectal cancer by 18%. 50 grams. Do you know how much that is? It's 2 slices of bacon, or a single deli sandwich. I thought about all those years I spent at my desk in the publishing house, grabbing a ham and cheese sandwich because I was being healthy by not eating a burger. I was actually eating something that was chemically designed to be shelf-stable, and those same chemicals were doing something inside me that I didn't understand. I remember asking my doctor about this, and he explained it in a way that finally clicked for me. He talked about nitrates. We use them as preservatives to keep the meat looking pink and to stop bacteria from growing. But when those nitrates hit the environment of our stomachs, they can turn into compounds that actually damage our DNA. They create these little glitches in our genetic code. Most of the time, our bodies are brilliant at fixing those glitches. But as we get older, as we pass 60 and 70, our repair crew isn't as fast as it used to be. Eventually, one of those glitches stays, and that's how the trouble starts. I even tried to outsmart the system. I started buying the packages that said nitrate-free. I felt pretty good about myself for a while, but then I looked closer. Most of those natural products just use celery powder or other natural sources of nitrates. To your body, it doesn't matter if the nitrate came from a lab or a stalk of celery. The chemical reaction in your gut is exactly the same. The processing itself, the smoking, the curing, it changes the very nature of the protein. I'm 77, and I've reached a point where I don't want to take those kinds of gambles anymore. An 18% increase in risk for something I can easily replace? That's just bad math. But it wasn't just the meat. There was a second realization I had to come to, and this one was harder because it's so woven into our social lives. It's alcohol. Now I know I can hear some of you thinking, but Warren, what about the glass of red wine? What about my grandmother who lived to be 100 and had a gin and tonic every night? I used to say the same things. I loved my father's stories about the old days, and I liked the idea that a drink was actually heart healthy. But we have to be honest with ourselves. The world our grandparents lived in, the air they breathed, the total toxic load they carried, it wasn't the same as ours. When I started looking at the classification of substances, I was shocked to find that alcohol is listed as a Group 1 carcinogen. That puts it in the same category as tobacco and asbestos. It's linked to 7 different types of cancer: breast cancer, liver, throat, esophageal, the list goes on. I found that even just 1 drink a day can raise your risk by about 9%. If you're having 3 drinks a week, you're still looking at a 4% increase. And it doesn't matter if it's an expensive Pinot Noir or a cheap beer. The ethanol is the problem. When your body breaks down alcohol, it produces acetaldehyde, which is a toxin that can cause permanent damage to your DNA. It's like throwing a wrench into a delicate machine every single day and hoping the gears don't strip. I had to ask myself, why was I drinking? Most of the time it was just habit, or it was a way to wind down after a stressful day. But when I realized I was voluntarily putting a Group 1 carcinogen into my system while being afraid of an orange because of the sugar, I felt like a fool. I want to take a moment here because I know this can feel overwhelming. I see you there, perhaps feeling a bit defensive or even a bit scared. I've been there. I know that many of you who watch this channel aren't subscribed yet, and I'd like to invite you to do that now. I'm not asking for me, I'm asking so we can stay connected. Health in our 70s isn't a solo sport. We need to look out for each other, and making sure you don't miss these conversations is how I can help look out for you. It's just a way for us to keep this dialogue going. Now, I'm not saying you have to live in a bubble. I'm not a monk and neither is Eleanor. We still live our lives, but we've shifted from being fearful to being strategic. There's a big difference. Fear makes you miserable. Strategy makes you powerful. Here is how I handle it now. I call it my brunch rule. If Eleanor and I go out for a special brunch maybe 3 or 4 times a year, and there's a side of high-quality bacon, I might have a slice. I enjoy it. I don't feel guilty, but I don't keep it in my house. It's no longer a part of my daily routine. I don't buy the deli turkey for my lunch anymore. Instead, I'll roast a whole chicken on Sunday and slice that up for the week. It takes a little more effort, but when I bite into that sandwich, I know exactly what's in it. No nitrates, no hidden processing, just real food. And with the alcohol, I had to be honest about my stress. I realized that if I needed a drink to relax, I wasn't actually relaxing. I was just numbing the stress. Now, I make a pot of herbal tea. I have my tea ritual in the evening. It gives me that same sense of the day is over, but without the acetaldehyde. And if I'm at a wedding or a big celebration, I might have a half glass of wine for the toast. But the daily habit? That's gone. I had a friend, a man I worked with for 30 years named Jim. Jim was terrified of everything. He stopped eating red meat entirely. He was convinced that even a bite of steak would give him a heart attack. But Jim lived on deli sandwiches and low-fat processed snacks. He was so focused on the wrong target that he didn't see the one that was actually hitting him. He ended up with a diagnosis that changed his life, and he was devastated because he felt like he'd done everything right. That's the tragedy I want to help you avoid. Doing everything right, but following the wrong map. I want you to feel like you're in the driver's seat. This isn't about being perfect. It's about understanding where the real risks are so you can make informed choices. If you decide to have a drink or a hot dog, do it knowing the data. Don't do it because you've been told it's safe or healthy. Envelhecer bem, aging well, begins with what you stop ignoring. We spend so much time looking for the next superfood, the next miracle berry from the Amazon, but sometimes the most powerful thing you can do for your health is just to stop doing the thing that's causing the damage. I look at my grandkids now. Little Leo is just starting to run, and Maya is asking questions about everything. And I realize that my health isn't just about me. It's about being the grandfather who can still get down on the floor and play with them. It's about being the man Eleanor can rely on as we navigate these later years together. The body always warns us before it collects its debt. Sometimes the warnings are silent, happening at the cellular level where we can't feel them. But we have the science now to know they're happening. We don't have to wait for the roar. We can listen to the whisper. I'm 77 years old. I've made plenty of mistakes. I've eaten 1,000 deli sandwiches and probably 1,000 more hot dogs in my life. I can't change the past, but I can change what I do today, and you can too. It starts with the next time you're at the grocery store. When you walk past that deli counter, just keep walking. Go to the butcher and get a real piece of meat. Go to the produce section and get that fruit you were afraid of. Take back your power from the fearmongers and the marketing experts. I'm telling you all of this because I want us to be here together for a long time. I want us to be the generation that showed it's possible to stay sharp, stay strong, and stay present well into our 80s and 90s. It's not about luck, it's about attention. If this made sense to you, if it resonated with something you've been feeling, then I'm glad we had this time together. You have more control than you think. You're not just a passenger in this journey of aging. You're the captain. And as long as you have the right map, you can navigate through almost anything. I'm going to go finish my tea now. Eleanor is calling me from the garden. She found something she wants me to see. It's the little things, isn't it? The garden, the tea, the quiet moments. Those are the things worth protecting. Take care of yourself. Pay attention to the whispers. And I'll see you soon.